Good day, everyone. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to join us for today's webcast, Anatomy of a Ransomware Attack. My name is Stephanie Cabina, Global Webinar Program Manager for Symantec, and I'll be the moderator today. I would like to go over a few basic intuitive housekeeping tips. If you have any questions anytime, please submit your questions using the Ask a Question button located at the bottom of the player. Your questions will be addressed during the QA session at the end of the presentation, time permitting. There's also some good resources for you to check out in the Attachments tab at the bottom of the player. You can download the slide deck from this presentation, as well as other resources anytime. At the end of the presentation, it's important for us to get feedback, so we really appreciate it if you could rate this presentation and provide feedback by clicking on the Rate This button on the right-hand side of the player. Today's webinar will be available on demand. For those that are new to BrightTalk, the link is the same. Okay, let me introduce you to today's speaker. We have Dennis York, Lead Incident Response Investigator at Symantec's Cybersecurity Services Business Unit. In this role, Dennis helps clients identify, contain, and eradicate the threat of sophisticated attack actors as part of Symantec's Incident Response Service. Our next speaker is Darren Lewis. He is a Principal Security Analyst on the Symantec Managed Security Services Global Threat Response Team, where he studies and builds threat detection for a broad spectrum of industries. He is responsible for keeping Symantec analysts and customers informed on changes and trends in the threat landscape. You could also read their bios in the attachment tab. Now, without further delay, I'd like to welcome you to today's webcast, Anatomy of a Ransomware Attack. And Dennis, please take it away.
Thank you, Stephanie. This is Dennis York, and as Stephanie mentioned, I'm a lead incident response investigator with our incident response team. I'm the person that you'll see on site, or one of the people that you'll see on site if you call us and need emergency response services to help you with a ransomware attack or some other type of breach. However, I'd really like to meet you under different circumstances, maybe for a planning session, something like that. So that's why we're doing this seminar today, to help prevent a ransomware attack. Just as a forewarning, I am just getting over a cold, and I'm going to do my best to not have a coughing fit while I'm presenting. But if I start something like that, I'll mute just for a few seconds and get over it, and then we'll be back to the presentation. So let's get on into this. We're going to talk first about ransomware evolution. Obviously, it's no surprise that this type of malware has been changing through the years. You've probably all seen something like this screen, if it's kind of small. Primitive early attempts to finagle money from end users looked something like this. Your computer's not running well. It needs to be cleaned or tuned up. Let us help you. Purchase our cleanup tool, our fix, our malware remover, whatever it happened to be. Pretty unsophisticated. Of course, they got better. Let's scare the user. Tell them that they actually have a virus and they're infected. This looks a lot more sophisticated than previous attempts at tricking users. We're basically telling them that they have a virus, even though they don't, and they need to click here to clean the virus, which of course takes them out to a site where they can pay for a so-called tool to clean it up. You may recognize this particular tool looks a lot like our Norton antivirus tool, but of course it isn't. As users got hip to that threat, malware artists got better at tricking users and playing on their emotions using things like the words FBI or IRS to increase the fear level and scare a user into thinking that maybe they'd visited a site they shouldn't have, pornography, child pornography, something like that. And if they just pay a small fine, we can make it all go away for you. Go out and again, pay, but until you do, we're going to leave your computer locked up. And finally, we get to, I think I just went one slide too far, to our current state of affairs. And, oh my gosh. One second. One more. There we go. Lastly, we've got to where we're not tricking a user into thinking there's something wrong with their machine or they have something that can be taken care of just by paying a small fine. Instead, with the availability of sophisticated encryption techniques that are available to anybody, we now have files that are actually being encrypted on the local machine, and they're not able to be unencrypted using common tools. The rise of anonymous payment systems such as Bitcoin has enabled these people, these malware actors, to remain cloaked and hidden as law enforcement gets better at tracking credit card transactions for the previous types of malware. This enables them to hide and do a better job at extorting money from you. So as technology has improved, more and more players are getting into this game. Delivery methods for ransomware have been rapidly changing, enabling ransomware to be delivered via exploit kits such as Rig, Angler, Black Hole, Neutrino, etc. We can see from the slide that the varieties of ransomware are growing rapidly. There's multiple variants. They infect different types of files, but more and more we see them encrypting just about every file on a machine. Hackers are also moving into the area of Linux and OS X operating systems, infecting Macs when they didn't used to be. Something like KE Ranger, mentioned up there in the upper right corner, as well as Android phone ransomware attacks via either rogue advertisements or porn applications. So, why are we seeing this increased activity in ransomware? Obviously, actors are smart and they recognize a minimal or very low risk versus high yield environment, which is what we have today. They know your environment and they know how you'll probably respond to it. Cryptography is easy. They know that people don't have good backup solutions in place or untested backup solutions, and so their opportunity for success is high. And again, low risk to them. They probably won't be caught. They won't be tracked via credit card payments, etc. They're going to ask for a Bitcoin or some other type of online currency. So how do we detect these new variants? So we know they're creative. They sometimes know more about your network than you do. They understand that patching in your environment is hard, and your percentage of success on patching is probably low, or certainly not fully done. Machine reboots, environment variables make that difficult to do, and they know it. They may know better than you which of your information and data is valuable and how they're going to monetize it once they have it. This is not a single person ordinarily doing these types of attacks. They're criminal organizations. They change methodologies fast and quickly when needed, and they'll do things to avoid detection. Probably as fast as you can try to keep them out of your environment, they're going to make changes and allow themselves to be getting into the environment. So we know it's impossible to protect everything in your environment. Probably not news to anybody that security of data is hard and it's expensive. So what do we do? Best practice is to prioritize the areas in which you're going to focus and apply the limited resources that you have there. For the other areas, seek help for the areas that you need, that you can't do yourself. Things just change too fast. You can't be everywhere all at once. Your people can't be trained in every single aspect. So ask for help. Let's talk about an actual ransomware attack. Darren's going to give us some insight into this area.
Thank you, Dennis. This is Darren Lewis. I am a senior principal analyst here at Symantec, and I look at customer data all day, and we try and find ways to enable detection so that we can alert customers to problems that are creeping up on them. And what I wanted to do was go through an actual ransomware attack that happened, give you a view into what happened, the impacts that it did have, what it could have had, what the company's thoughts on it were, and some recommendations even that they've given back as far as what others might do in their situation or what they would have done had they known in advance. So the targeted organization was a global financial and insurance organization. They have a presence in a number of different countries and dozens of subsidiary organizations. This is not a small company at all. And they have a very complex global network that spans through their parent and through all their subsidiaries. So there are multiple different points on the network where they're unable to implement controls simply because of laws or because information had to flow freely through that particular node. So when we take a look at the attack, the attack occurred just like many attacks do for ransomware. It just began with an email. They couldn't share the original email with us, unfortunately, simply because it was branded very much with their brand, and it looked extremely real. That's one thing that has happened during the evolution of ransomware, is that the emails have been getting better and better. Long gone are the days with commonly misspelled words and those sorts of problems. Now they look very real. The headers are completely forged. Now what this particular attack had with it was the delivery of the malware was done to a Microsoft Word document. So of course you use a document name that looks very appealing to the business. It could be an invoice, which is what it was in this particular case. It could also be a threat of a lawsuit or any number of other types of either inflammatory or just very interesting titles of documents that would trick people into clicking on them. The emails look very, very similar to other vendor emails. In fact, it looks very much like the criminals have seen a large body of those emails so that they can copy a lot of different vendors' look and feel really easily. As you can see, the email itself has a macro inside of it. So when you take a look at that actual email, when you click on it, you get a macro warning at the top saying, hey, this looks jumbled to you. Click here to enable macros. Well, jumbled text is just a ruse, and as soon as you enable macros, it goes out and begins downloading the loader. Now, as we break down that attack, the macros get enabled. It goes and it downloads the executable from a remote server and sticks it in the temp folder, and it's Locky. Some of you may very well recognize the screen from Locky here. I've blocked out in red the actual payment signature that it puts at the end of each line. But the encryption of the files on the affected machine began immediately, and the malware searched for shared drives so that it could do lateral spread. That's one major problem with today's ransomware, is that it's not just infecting the files on the computer you have. The first thing it does is it goes and it looks for drive shares. So even if you take a machine offline as soon as it's infected and blow it away, which is a kind of a bad maneuver, doesn't mean that you've actually cleaned the infection. It can still have poison files living on file shares. We did, however, in this particular case, find it within a couple of minutes on the machine itself. Because once someone clicked the binary, the software that was running on the endpoint looking for signatures for Locky, picked it up, and we were able to detect it and then alert them within just a couple of minutes. Now, due to the fact that we were able to detect it, they took steps to isolate the segment very quickly to limit the spread. So really, it only got to one local shared drive, but that's within literally a few minutes. The malware had already infected the machine, began its work of encrypting all the files on it, and then done lateral spread to a shared drive. Luckily, the company has a very, very good backup and restore policy in place, and within a couple of hours, they had all the affected drives completely restored and verified. So they were back up and running with very minimal outage and inconvenience to themselves. The attack actually ended up being unsuccessful because of that, and they were not really even thinking about paying the ransom because they knew that they had all their tools in place. The affected machines that were hit didn't have any access to customer data directly. So luckily, the person who clicked on the email and the link inside of it and opened up the attachment name, they didn't really have access to direct customer data, and so they didn't lose anything. And because it was detected quickly and got remediated so fast, it didn't have a chance to go out and leak customer information, which really was their biggest fear. So what actually happened, they had a couple of hours of downtime for restore from backup. They had to remediate a couple servers that got infected. The employees got some remedial training to remind them about clicking on links. And regardless of how many times you train someone, they're always going to click. So training is one of those things that's going to have to be done continuously anyway. But most importantly, they didn't get to pay the ransom. And they were very happy about that because the ransom set were rather high. Now, of course, if you look at the worst case scenario impact, and I discussed this with them, there could have been incalculable losses to their reputation. In fact, there was an article in a magazine not 2 weeks ago that stated that half of UK consumers wouldn't do business with a hacked company. That's the kind of reputation that it's hard to put a price on because you don't even know how to quantify that. If you lose trust with your consumers, particularly in banking, but healthcare is now the major targeted organization. So imagine if it were patients looking for a healthcare provider and they had the same feelings, and half of them wouldn't do business with you because you've been hacked, even not because it was your own fault or just because you were targeted. They were also very fearful of an unrecoverable loss of data, particularly financial data. There were many records that had they been lost, it would have caused a great deal of trouble for them, not only now in the loss of that financial data, but also later when compliance time comes around and they have to be checked for compliance. Having a breach under your belt is not an easy thing to recover from at compliance time. The downtime that they suffered was fairly minimal. Again, having a great backup and restore that you're testing frequently makes life easy, and everyone's already ready to do it, and they know what their parts are, as opposed to having an extended downtime. And a lot of companies that have been hit with ransomware and weren't prepared have suffered days worth of downtime. And it gets in the news that they're down for days and that everyone's working on paper again. And again, that goes back to the incalculable loss to reputation. So how does it look when that kind of information hits the news? They were also worried about persistent network access to their networks and access to some of their most critical data and IP. A lot of what organizations have that's their highest value assets is actually their intellectual property, and frequently that's stored on their servers. So whether it's plans for the future, whether it's product designs, whether it's agreements that haven't been signed yet and are still in the planning phases, that kind of IP is what criminals look for. Once you've been had by ransomware, you have to imagine and understand that the criminals also have access to that data, so they can pull it as well. A lot of the C2 call-ups will do multiple things other than just fetch a key and start encrypting, because once you have the money, that's great, but you now have control of the machine. And of course, the company was very much concerned about their inability to pass subsequent audits, simply because they're in the financial sector, one of the most heavily regulated sectors on the planet. Going through those audits, again, once you've been breached, it's really hard to justify and say, hey, we're fully protected once you've had one of those breaches. So I asked the customer, well, what would you tell somebody else to do to get through one of these, or at least to avoid having it if you could? And what they told me was that they would recommend that everybody have multiple layers of controls in place, that there are lots of ways that malware infects hosts. In fact, it goes through several phases. And most of the time, all you have to do is just disrupt one phase of that infection process, and you can avoid the whole thing. It just won't happen. And that very much follows some of the threat models that are used today, particularly the cyber kill chain that was created by Lockheed Martin and others. So again, further to left of the chain you can get, and the earlier you can detect, stop, and remediate, the more you can avoid full infection. So Dennis, I'll turn it back over to you to let them know how Symantec can help.
Great, thanks, Darren. Before I get into this, in fact, let me just back up one slide so we're not kind of reading ahead. But I know from the incidents, the ransomware incidents that I've worked, that one of the very first questions that comes up is, should we just pay the ransom and get this over with? So let me just take 1 minute and tell you how Symantec would respond to that question. And the answer is, we will always recommend that you do not pay the ransomware. As we know with from our home or work junk mail, spam mail, that if you reply back to that unsubscribe button, depending on whether it's something you actually subscribe to, there's a very good chance that you're going to move to the A list to get more of the same. You're acknowledging that you received, message received, your attack worked, okay, we just want it to go away, how do we pay? And we'll caution against doing that. Not just for your business, but for the sake of other businesses that may get hit with ransomware. We don't want to give attackers the knowledge that we're weak or that they can extort us additional times. Unless you know that you're absolutely plugging the hole that ransomware came in, there's a likely chance that you're going to get it again, and they know that you paid the first time, and they'll fully expect you to pay the second time, or third or fourth. So just hope I get that out of the way right there. So this slide's titled 10 Ways Symantec Can Help, but let me preface this with just saying that these 10 items that are here, you should be able to take care of all of these things either yourself or with help from Symantec or somebody else. So as we go through these, keep that in mind that we can help you with all 10 of them or we can help you with 2 of them. But all these things you'll probably need help with during a ransomware incident. The first one, root cause analysis, we've learned that rarely is ransomware on a single machine the primary infector. It may be a phishing message that a user happened to click on, but think about that. Was that user the only one targeted? Did they just happen to find that single user in your HR department or your management department? Or did it come in somewhere else and their machine just happened to get infected? So first thing we're going to do is figure out how it got there and help you understand the hole that needs to be plugged to keep it from happening again. 2, develop a data recovery strategy. Some companies have data recovery companies that they contract with for large-scale server failures, etc. You may have that ability in-house. Incidents are all different. We can help you determine the best way to do your data recovery if there's encrypted files. Again, depending on the variant, there may be different factors involved. 3, contain the spread of malware. Darren mentioned before that we know how ransomware works. It lands on a system, it runs, it encrypts files of various types, leaving the machine running so it can display its message. But more importantly, that ransomware may try to spread to additional machines, not meaning encrypting files on additional machines. Yes, it wants to do that, and it can do that simply by file shares. But it also wants to put the malware itself, the ability to encrypt files on multiple machines, so that as you come along and clean up behind it, it's still moving around in your environment. So knowing how it works and how it spreads, we can help keep that from happening. The ransomware running on a machine may just be a smoke screen for a more sophisticated attack. If you simply wipe that machine, this is the fastest way to get going again. We'll just wipe the machine. There is no important files on it. Everything's up on the file server, which looks okay. Let's just re-image the machine and move on. But unfortunately, doing so may wipe evidence of an advanced threat that came in along with the malware or with the ransomware. So we're going to help you determine whether there's something else there if you give us that ability. Type of encryption used. Obviously, we have reverse engineer people on staff. They possibly can look at the malware, the ransomware, and determine how it works in depth and find a weakness in the malware implementation that may help you with data recovery. Encrypting files does no good if they leave the unencrypted files simply deleted on the file system, where they can be easily undeleted. So if the software developer happened to not implement that well, just simply did a delete of the file, we may discover that and help you be able to recover your files much faster than wiping and re-imaging all your machines. Obviously, incidents, every single incident is fluid. They change very rapidly. They're time-consuming. Having an incident response plan in place can help, but if it's incomplete, it hasn't been tested in the last couple of years, or it doesn't exist at all, we can help you specifically with your incident and I mentioned act as a breach coach. You're going to need to communicate with people, whether it's your board, whether it's the public through press releases, whether it's with the FBI, whether you're asking for help or they're coming to you to tell you that you have a breach you don't know about. We can help with that. We have experience in this area. Attack attribution is important. Our deep sight managed adversary and threat intelligence, or what we call MADI team, can help provide additional intel about the attacker and provide context around the incident, which may help you prevent future attacks. It helps to know who's attacking you so that you can help defend against it. Obviously, we want to help you prepare for future attacks. Again, I talked about reimaging machine. It's a bad idea. It's a quick cleanup, but it doesn't really help you understand what happened and how you're going to prevent this from happening in the future. So what can you do ahead of time to keep this from happening? Because I can assure you it's not much fun. So a general approach, we never have perfect knowledge, so we can never be sure that you're preparing for exactly the right things. So this is going to be a general strategy. There's 4 bullets here, but implementation of these 4 bullets can be very difficult. Number 1, understand your environment. Have a network map, please. Don't call us or somebody else in and ask for help and not be able to tell us about your environment. Having an inventory of your machine names and IP addresses is very helpful and can rapidly help us get a situation under control. Know where you stand on your patch management. Is it complete? Is it incomplete? Do you have no management in place whatsoever? Know the tools that you have in place, endpoint tools, know how they're implemented, what sort of configurations are in use, and know the people skills that you have that may be available to us or to yourself to help during an incident. Know the threat landscape. Read. Have your threat analysts, I hope you have threat analysts, have them read about what's going on and know thy enemy. Know their tactics, know what's changing in the ransomware scene, know the different ways that ransomware is being delivered, and understand whether you have the ability to stop that. Helps to know their tactics and methodologies. Number 3, understand what you're protecting. What is the value of the data that you're trying to protect? Look at this not only from your viewpoint, what you think you're protecting, but also the viewpoint of the attacker. If it's in your hands, it's worth X, but if it's in their hands, it's worth what? Are we talking about personal information, healthcare information, credit card data? Where is it in your environment, and does it have proper fences around it? And lastly, design your security plan about each one of these things mentioned in 1 through 3. Keep your plan updated and current. So planning challenges. This is a busy slide. There's a lot to think about. I don't have to tell you that. I won't go through each of these, but I can tell you that most companies are not keeping up. There's just simply too many areas to focus on, whereas the attackers have very few things to focus on. They are looking for weaknesses. They read just like we do. They know that patching is hard. They know that they have good programming skills. They learn. They change. A lot of these exploit kits actually have help desks. You buy the software, you have trouble implementing it somewhere, you can call the help desk and actually talk to a technician and get help with distributing the malware. Think about that. How do you counter that in your organization? So planning and preparation, these technical considerations are probably already being done in your environment, but take a look at them and just be sure of that. Access controls, Darren talked about ransomware spreading via file shares. It's very simple. Users have access to file shares. Usually does no good to give them access to file shares if they don't have right access to those. That means the ransomware has right access and can modify those files on shares. So your defense is to only give users access that they need. Don't give them access to the financial data if they don't need it. Least privilege methodology is a good one to follow here. Sufficient logging. A lot of times on the incidents where I'm deployed, obviously logging is enabled. What we find a lot of times is it's not enabled at the depth that we'd like to see it. Yes, we have log on, log off logs. How far back? Oh, there's so many of them, we only keep them for 24 hours. Not going to help us if you call us in a week after you see some malicious activity going on. Capacity planning, figure in for your DDoS attacks. Network visibility, as mentioned before, have logging enabled. Keep at least the metadata if you can. Full packet is better. Detect and block. Keep up on intelligence. Let's talk about the often missed non-technical considerations in your planning. Most of these are probably not being considered. What is the business impact assessment if something like a large ransomware attack happens? Can your business survive being down for hours, a day, multiple weeks? Could you get sued for your data breach or your inability to operate your business? Some sort of service level agreements may be in play that you're not going to be able to have any control over if your documents are encrypted. Corporate policies. Is your policy in the IT department to allow infected machines to be wiped and re-imaged? Is that what's going to happen when malware starts spreading, that machines get turned off and they just gold image gets redeployed and we've wiped all traces? Communication is very important during a breach. Do you have a PR plan in place should you need it? Who's going to talk to the media when they start reporting on your breach because an employee tells somebody, or a patient tells somebody, or a vendor tells somebody about the ransomware? How will you respond to a call from the FBI when they start hearing about the incident, or it's not ransomware but some other sort of data breach? Or worse, what about Brian Krebs when he calls you and says he's looking at your data? Do you have any comment? Best to have something ready for that. And finally, if you don't have in-source resources to conduct an investigation of a machine, a server, whatever it happens to be, do you know who you're going to call and how fast they're going to be able to respond? So consider these often missed parts of the plan and see what you can do to improve your situation ahead of time. So put the plan in place, keep it simple, stupid, right, KSS. Develop an incident response plan. Simply put, define the stakeholders, the roles, responsibilities, determine your technical factors, how you're going to log, who has rights to data, what sort of skill sets do you have. If you find that you don't have any of these skill sets that you've determined are important as part of your incident response plan, consider your hiring practices, whether you're going to hire and train these people and how you'll keep their skill set current, or simply turn that over to an outside vendor and count on them when the time comes. But it needs to be done. Once that plan is in place, create playbooks. Define the top 3 to 5 attack types that you'll likely face in your environment. If you're a big retail organization with point-of-sale systems, that'll be number one in your playbook. How do I handle a breach of my payment data? How will I stop it? How will I investigate it? If, on the other hand, you're a insurance company, you have a lot of data on clients, personal information, how will I handle a breach of that data? So determine that ahead of time and work out playbooks for different types of attacks, whether it's a web server defacement, whether it's a ransomware attack happening in one office or multiple offices, and then get the information to the stakeholders and participants so that they know what their role will be when the time comes. Lastly, develop the program, test the plan using a tabletop exercise and a mock scenario. These can be stressful, but not nearly as stressful as an incident's going to be. It's nice to be able to do a tabletop exercise at your leisure over a few days and get feedback from a trusted provider that's been in the trenches before and can give you critique of the way that the department's acted or your communication methods, etc. And lastly, retrain and reevaluate your plan as needed as your business changes. So I'm going to turn it over to Darren for this.
Thanks, Dennis. The customer had, and many other customers have actually asked us to kind of give them some advice when it comes to protecting individual machines. Because again, there are some behaviors you're not going to train out of people. So what can you do to defense in depth, add a few more controls? And so some of the things that we've recommended are, again, bulletproof backup and restore, and test it. That one's a no-brainer. But some of the things that people don't think about are things like set macros to only be allowed to run from trusted locations. And you can do that. I put the TechNet article in here that'll show you how to do that. So that way, you can't run macros from the downloaded file you just got. It can only be run when it's in a certain place. And that's one way to help prevent these things from firing in the first place. Again, detecting these things early and isolating them is the key. So you need to have something monitoring your systems at all levels, not only at the network level, but also at the host level. You need to know your IR group. I know Dennis has been telling you about all the things that he's gone through in IR. And if you don't have an IR group, or if your group has limited or they have limited experience, then you need to get an IR service and have them on speed dial. Having a retainer in place is a great way to do that. That way, if you have an incident, your IR guys can run normal day-to-day stuff, and when you have something happen, you've got somebody you can lean on to bring in the extra headcount that you're going to need and the extra capabilities that you may not have developed in-house. Finally, I recommend that they do a full test of their systems and people to see how they're going to respond and remediate any gaps in their risk profile. Again, it's about training, testing, and retraining, and you got to do it regularly because if you test something and it fails, well, you may need to do retraining. You may also need to make some adjustments. But what you need to test are the weak links in the system, and usually that is your people. I will make a couple of small comments at the end here before we go to questions and answers. One of those is that even though we've looked at how malware, and particularly ransomware, has been evolving and how quickly, it hasn't been a week or two since we've seen malware now try and double up on the ransomware. So a second ransomware comes in and tries to do a re-encryption of already encrypted, so then you would have to pay twice. It's becoming quite the nightmare out there for ransomware attacks, and the value of bitcoins is climbing because so many people are buying bitcoins to pay ransom, and it's a terrible cycle that's going on. I know we have some questions to address along those lines, so I will hold that up. I will turn it back over to Stephanie. Do we have any questions?
Yes, we do. But before we get to questions, just a friendly reminder, can you please do me a favor, everybody on the line? Can you please rate this webinar? It's important to us to get your feedback. Also, feel free to give us any comments for future webinars. So again, don't forget to rate this presentation, and you can just click the button where it says rate this. Okay, so let's get started with our first question. Any questions, by the way, we don't get to, we'll address after this webinar. Okay, so this first question is, what is the name of threat actors who execute these types of attacks? Can you describe any other of their identifying behaviors?
Darren, you want to name names?
Oh, would I like to name names? Yeah, sure, I can name any name you want to hear. The problem is that most ransomware now is almost commodity, to the point where you can't even tell, you can't use it for retribution purposes. It's so easy to get. I know I was just mentioning just a second ago about the double up ransomware. It's $39 online. You go home with a credit card and you buy it. So that could be anybody and their brother. Are there people that are known for using ransomware? That's really not anybody's particular MO. Again, you have to look at the goal of ransomware, and that is to make a lot of money as quickly as possible. That's exactly what they're doing, right? They're blackmailing you, holding you hostage, holding your computers hostage until you pay them off. They want payment in bitcoins, and even when we try and trace the bitcoins, they split it up into sub-wallets and move the money around 50 times. So even if it weren't a cryptocurrency that's nearly impossible to trace as it is, it's getting split and moved around so much you can't even tell what part of it was the original ransom that was paid. So naming names, you could pick almost the name of any particular threat actor today, and if they feel that they need a cash influx, ransomware is what they're going to go to because it's cheap, it's quick, and it's easy to deploy.
Okay, thank you. Okay, this question, let's see. Once the file server is with any ransomware, is it relevant to not reboot the system? To try to clean with some solution or with some action seeing the memory information?
I'll take that one.
Okay.
Whether it's a file server or even a workstation, usually, in the case of ransomware, usually what we're seeing is a workstation gets infected. Most workstations still, in the corporate environment that we see, users still have local admin rights when they shouldn't have, but that's just the way it is. So usually file servers are a bit more locked down. So what we see on a file server is simply the file shares being encrypted. So ransomware not running on the file server, it really doesn't matter in this case. But what the question is it relevant to not reboot the system? I can tell you as a responder, any artifacts that I can get that involve RAM and current running processes and connections is going to be very relevant to me in learning what's running on the machine or how it got there. So yes, unplug the machine from the network so that if the malware is actually running on it and reaching out to other file shares to encrypt files. If you have tools in place that can do something like a RAM dump or capture open network connections, other volatile data that's going to go away when the server gets shut down. If you have tools that can collect that stuff, then collect it. If you don't, the point of keeping the machine running is really not going to help. You probably won't know how to investigate it, and once you shut it down, those artifacts are lost to me. I can tell you that our Symantec incident response retainer customers, we distribute a tool to them when a contract is signed that allows volatile data to be collected if they have something suspicious going on. And they can call us when that happens. We can walk them through how to run the tool. And if they want to reboot the machine or shut it down, that's fine. We just ask that they grab the data first. So definitely something like memory and network connections is very valuable in an investigation.
Okay, great. Thank you. This is a good question. Are there motivations aside from money at work in these types of attacks? You know, how they want money. Are there other motivations? Like, why do they do these attacks?
I can take that one.
Thank you.
In a lot of cases, money is a primary concern, simply because these pay off. But you have to look at the after effects of getting hit by a ransomware attack and look at the motivations behind it. And in a lot of cases, the motivations could be not so much the money as it is humiliation. Having your company down and inaccessible for any period of time can, make a bank look as if they're unable to do business properly or if they're insecure. We've seen the same thing happen in healthcare facilities, where once they're hit with ransomware, people tend to shy away from giving information that before they were much more willing to give. So that's one reason, other than money, that people use would be to make the organization look weak or look insecure. Other reasons include politically motivated reasons. So you can really look at this as a form of DOS attack, if you like, where you're taking somebody down. They're unable to perform the business functions that they're set up to do when their machines and their data is inaccessible. So this really is a kind of DOS attack in a way, whereby they're not able to do that. So there are both political factors, I think, as well as doing damage to a company's reputation. And as both Dennis and I have mentioned, once the machine's infected, goodness knows what other malware might also have been brought in. So at that point, you don't know if they've also installed other back doors, because the ransomware itself may merely have been the smoke screen to get you running around like crazy trying to figure out how to get rid of ransomware, while at the same time they're exfilling all of your data. So in a lot of cases, you have that same issue going on where the goal may be theft of intellectual property, but what's happening in the front that has everyone going crazy is the ransomware. So I think there are a lot of reasons other than financially motivated means that people are using to run ransomware.
Okay, hey, thank you. That was really informative. Okay, the next question. Is it possible to fingerprint the ransomware and capture the signature so that it can be blocked?
Darren, you want that, or do you want me to?
Sure, I'll take it. Literally, the way malware is sold today is that you can go online and purchase a piece of malware, check a bunch of boxes for which features you want, you get a new binary. By changing one byte in a binary, I get a different signature from it. Yeah, there's fuzzy hashing and partial hashing that we can do, but at the end of the day, it gets impossible to get every variant of every piece of malware, particularly when every day I'm looking at different ways of having the malware delivered. So remember, every new vulnerability in CVE that comes out is a new possible route of entry. So while you may be able to detect the malware, you may not be able to detect it until it's already running on the machine, particularly if there's a brand new vulnerability. I'm trying not to name names of favorite companies that have lots of vulnerabilities and release them on monthly cycles, for example. But, that happens. And so therefore, you get those kinds of problems where even if you knew the malware and it was the same one every month, there would still be a new vehicle for entry, and knowing wouldn't help you in that particular case. But no, I don't think it's possible to simply write a signature for each type of malware. From the Locky example that I had in particular, there are hundreds of variants of it. Each one of them appears different. While they have similar code in the middle, you've got different groups using it. They buy it, they add their own little flair to it. Again, it's downloading its own RSA keys now to avoid going out to C2 servers. And this stuff is evolving. And when malware first came out, it was months to years between the first iteration and the second iteration. It's minutes to hours now. So literally, by the time we implement some detection or something to block a piece of malware, the next day they worked around it. And this is a non-stop battle that we're going to be having going forward. So I don't think there's an easy solution of just, now that we know that this is lucky and or a variant, we can simply block it because we know about it. I think it's a twofold problem. First, hundreds of variants. I mean, .odin was the latest extension that it's used, and those make it look different to everybody. And secondly, having all the different vulnerabilities that are non-stop coming out give new and more creative vectors of entry.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's see here. This is another question here. It's interesting. How do you know how much Bitcoin circuits in the economy for ransomware payment?
Could you repeat that one?
How do you know how much Bitcoin circuits in the economy for ransomware payment?
You probably mean circulates. Darren kind of mentioned that already.
Okay, so we will.
Well, he mentioned that the value of bitcoins is growing, possibly related to the number of ransomware payments that are being made.
Oh, we've actually witnessed companies that are pre-purchasing bitcoins because they know they're going to pay. And I still scratch my head when I hear stories like that, because I go, why on earth wouldn't you, rather than spend your money on bitcoins, which is a fluctuating cryptocurrency, spend that money on putting the right security in place and being more secure in the end of the day. But yeah, it's absolutely driving the cost of bitcoins up. It's gone from $400 to $600. It has been in the thousands before, which is interesting because even Lizard Squad, which we thought was gone, is now making a recurrence and starting to make threats again. So the value of bitcoins is being used by not just ransomware criminals, by others. And Dennis is right. It's hard to pin the value on any particular thing, but it certainly does not help that people pay this ransom, because it continues to feed a criminal infrastructure that's not going to stop while the money's there. If the money dries up, they'll go looking for it somewhere else. But so long as people keep paying, I think that's going to be around for a while.
All right, thank you. Dennis, I think this question's for you. What is the speed and visibility of ransomware attack, and how fast would I be able to see I'm under attack?
Yeah, that's a good question. I did see that one out there. So if you, for example, if you have a phishing message that gets to a single user, what you're probably going to see on that machine is high CPU activity as the malware starts to encrypt files. And incidentally, it's going to encrypt just about every file on a Windows system, short of the files that's required to actually let Windows continue to run. So if there's any doubt whatsoever about whether your type of file is going to get encrypted, you can count on the fact that it will. If it's anything that's valuable to you, it's going to get encrypted. So if you want to stop it, unplug the computer. I mean, as in shut the computer off. That'll stop the encryption. The encryption speed, in our experience, it starts with the smallest files first. So your big movie, AVI file, something like that, is probably going to be last. It's very opportunistic. So why would it start with a great big file that's going to take an hour to encrypt when it can start with little tiny Word documents and Excel spreadsheets and move very rapidly through those, and MP3s and JPEGs and PDF files? and then continue on to the bigger files. As far as spreading in your environment, same thing's going to happen. It's going to start with the files that it knows about, and just kind of move around using that particular user's rights. Now, all bets are off if this wasn't something that started with a single machine. So we had a case that we worked that was not the delivery method, and instead reconnaissance happened for weeks. Attackers were in the environment for weeks. They collected administrator credentials, and once they had that and machines identified, which are file servers, which are workstations, where are they, is the network flat or segmented, they plotted and planned and then pushed the button, and it happened all at once. And we're not talking about encryption happening all at once. We're talking about the distribution of the malware itself to thousands of machines all at once. Now, I can tell you from experience that when that happens, you're going to know it immediately. Your help desk or somebody is going to get inundated with calls, and you're going to be very busy for the next few weeks. Pull out your incident response plan.
Well, unfortunately, we actually have a lot of questions coming in, but we're running out of time. So our speakers today will address these questions offline. I wanted to thank everybody again for your time today. Looking forward to seeing you at our next webinar, and have a wonderful day. Thank you, everybody.